Brady Dahmer. You are a marketing genius. You've been in this business for a long time. You've written a couple of books on it. Real estate agents, that is their job, is to market themselves. A big part of what they do. Let's dig into some of the things that you do. And you've been talking about some of the blind spots on the book that you have written most recently. And let's jump into what that's all about. Let's just start there, and then we'll dig in deeper.
Appreciate it. Joe, thanks for allowing me on your show. This is great. Super excited about this because, I've worked with many real estate agents and builders in the past, so we can kind of go really, really deep into things, but I'll do a quick intro. I've been in the industry for marketing, branding, communications for about 25 years now. And then about 4 years ago, I had this idea for the book. And it came out of, I had two friends call me up, and they were in some really bad situations with their designer. One of their designers lost all of their files. And when I say lost, it was like their brochures, their headshots, all this stuff that they've been working on for years. And designer, the hard drive crashed. And all of a sudden, when the client went back to get an update on the brochure, they lost all their files. And so they called me up and said, hey, what can we do? This designer lost all our files. What do we do? And then my first question to them was, well, where's your copy of it? And of course, there was that silence on the other end. And they're like, well, we didn't know. And we didn't know we had to have them or needed them or everything else. We assumed, which again, you'll hear this a lot in the conversation, and I bring up a lot in the book, is the assumption of they assumed that designer would always have it. And then another one, and I think this is also too relevant to your agents as well, because they're always getting headshots done or various other things, is that we hired an illustrator. So our client of ours hired an illustrator to do these beautiful illustrations for this book, only a year later to find those illustrations on pillows and throws on their Etsy store. So my client's like, hey, how can they do this? We paid for the illustrations. I'm like, but do you own the illustrations? Like, who has the rights for those? And they're like, well, no, we paid for them. And like that, just because you paid for them doesn't mean that you own them. There's creative licensing and things in that. So when it comes,
that happens with real estate agents on their photos too.
100%. Yeah, they're always, for how long or whatever that is. But so the gears started turning. I'm like, but there's a lot of these assumptions or things that people don't know about, that when it comes to hiring or using creatives. So that being people that do identities or websites, all the sort of branding communication tools that we use. There's a lot of things they don't know. They don't know the questions to know. And I'm sure we've all had a really bad experience with a contractor in one way or another, whether it be a building contractor or whatever else, that maybe halfway through the project kind of walks away. And so this book, I thought about all these sort of circumstances and scenarios. I thought, I'm going to write a book for the person who has the most to lose in this, and that's the small business, that's the entrepreneur, because the contractor, the designer, the web designer, all those guys can just they can take the deposit or whatever payment they have and walk away from the project, leaving the small business or the agent without a website. Here's another thing too, without a website. Now they're behind time. So however long that took to go, now they're behind on their business schedule. So hey, if they're 2-3 weeks, a month into it, now there's a month lost of time. And also there's that whatever you paid to have it done at that point. So I thought about who's at risk, and I thought, I'm going to write a book kind of highlighting all the questions you should ask, all the checklists that you should kind of go through when you're starting a project from beginning to end, whether or not be from where you should start, what you should have before you even talk to somebody, how to hire somebody, how to interview process, and all that stuff, to make sure at the very end that you're well equipped and you kind of know what blind spots are out there, so you can drive around them and duck and weave through them and where the risks are. So
I know a lot of agents, and I'm assuming you're talking good-sized firms or real local professionals. I know a lot of agents out there are using Fiverr and things of that nature to pull their designs together. Yeah. Is that a big risk?
It's not so much a risk. You just never know what you're going to get. And also too, one of the things when you're using a lot of these, you get what you pay for. And that's sort of when a lot of these, they're cheap for a reason. Let's just say that, because sometimes depending on where you are, a lot of those designs or things can get used again and again. So it depends how unique the agent wants to be, how original their brand. And also, just like any other industry, having someone with a few more years, investing in someone who has an agency, who's maybe a little bit more local, who could really speak to that demographic. But also, you're probably connecting with someone who's just out of school, so with very limited experience. They might not even know the questions to ask you, and they're just, you as maybe an unexperienced marketer, you're just sort of everybody's just kind of guiding along without any real insight or any sort of like real business insight on how to make it better, what to do. So it's great for the first round for Fiverr for sure. Just get it up and out there. I know there's a lot of agents that are just starting out, and just getting a feel for it and testing it is really great. But as you grow your business, it's probably best to start that relationship with someone in marketing to help you grow, and they can kind of see and work with you. And it's again, the years of insight. Now, again, we've all been in that room with those people who have those years of insight that can just, they know what to do or how to handle situations better.
Yeah. Yeah. So this book, the Blindspot Handbook,
Yep.
it is, when I looked at it, and I didn't read it yet. Sorry. It is, and hey, we'll be talking offline, that this is definitely something I got to be reading. I'm just starting my business out and getting my methodologies on what I'm saying and all that. So like for me, this is perfect timing. I need to look at that book. I got to understand what this is all about. When a real estate agent gets into this business, it's a proven business.
Yeah.
They're not a proven person. So would this book help them figure out what their niche is going to be and how to take advantage of their strengths and build it into, again, a proven business?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It does, because how the book is kind of even broken down is from beginning to end of a project. And at the very beginning of the project, like any business, it's about understanding your market and understanding who you are, how you operate. I'm speaking directly to like agents, because everybody functions and works a little different, how they communicate. So it helps understanding that, but also the industry, the market that you're in, the neighborhoods that you're working in. And so the first part of the book, it really focuses on, before you start talking to any marketing person or anybody exterior, it's like, do your research, understand who you are, what your vibe is going to be, what your brand is going to be, and sort of like walk through that, create those boards, start collecting those things from other, not just real estate agents, but other builders or lifestyle. Like, again, like anybody deals in lifestyle, like start creating a folder of images and sayings and things like that you like, that you authentically connect to. And that's one part of it. It's a visual part, but also from a language standpoint, the great thing about now with AI and being able to do, like, for instance, ChatGPT, you can really dive into doing that deep research on, like, what are the top 20 realtors in my area, what is their message, what is their competition, like what is their messaging, and how can I compete in this market against them, like what's my unique selling proposition and all of that. So you can do that research first, and that's beyond anything we're talking about, design or any of the other stuff. Do that research, do that competitive analysis, do that market research. And that's the deeper you go, and the better your success is going to be, the better you're going to stand out, because there's lots of them. And the uniqueness is what's going to set you apart. The more you can be unique and the more you can understand it, the better you'll be.
And I'll jump in on this one. That's a challenge when an agent's brand new.
Yep.
They don't know where their strengths are at that point, unless they're coming in from a business that can parlay, kind of like tag into, or they can bring that world of real estate into it. A lot of them just don't know where that strength is. So it takes time for them to figure that out. And I found with the agents that I'm working with, where I try to place them into a firm that matches with them, that process is a deep self-discovery. As that Chat GPT can actually help to a degree.
Yeah.
Although you can manipulate that to what answers you want as well.
True, but it's kind of like acting. You don't know how good or bad you are, or what needs to be fixed, until you actually go do it, right? Until you're on stage, until you're actually in that process. So there is a huge amount of learning's exactly that kind of theoretical or research, that the book research, versus actually being able there and talking with sellers, talking with buyers and sellers, and seeing how the whole industry works and see where you fit in. And that's key. But you're right. You have to do that, and also here, I was speaking with a guy earlier today, and we were talking a lot about mentorship and asking questions. And a lot of this comes down to agents, maybe if they can tag along, or who they can learn from, and just watching, just in that experience where they can watch and learn and try to, maybe some of it gets impressed on who they are and how they're kind of, what their style is going to be and what their business model is going to look like. But yeah, it was a mentorship, and I always jump in and say yes and try to experience it all, so that you can learn from it.
Yeah. An agent absolutely has to be open-minded, or anybody getting into any business. They need to surround themselves with others that are doing it at a much higher level, so that they can understand, one, how they got there and how they work it, and what can that individual agent pull from that and use within themselves and not try to replicate. In real estate, there are so many books out there, and I have several that are all about this methodology that's going to make you a millionaire. And there's books and books.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not going to relate to 99.9% of the people.
Yeah.
Exactly how that book was read. Very rarely when somebody can pick up and duplicate the exact way that person, whoever wrote the book, got there. There are a few instances where there's great success.
Yep.
Yeah, it's they're teaching it the way they built it, and that's their model. It doesn't apply to everybody.
We're all a little different. Like our brains kind of work in different ways, how we organize information, how we like to communicate. And that's even I think about it too, like there's certain clients that we work really well together because we just share that same train of thought, and other ones we don't. And also in that, it's understanding. This even comes back to one of the points in the book. And when you're hiring somebody, is like just make sure they're on the same page with you. And that's kind of when you're hiring creative, any kind of consultant or designer, but just take time to interview them and just understand who they are and they're the right fit for you. And I guess from an agent and buyer standpoint, it's like not every buyer, every seller is going to give the same vibe as you do either. And don't get distracted or don't get disappointed if someone, it's not that right fit, because everybody's a little different. So you gotta jump in there with both feet and you gotta go at it. Right. And that's but also understand like there's a lot of different people in different lanes, and you got to find that lane for you.
Once you find that ideal client, that's where you direct your marketing to, right? And
100%.
that you stay on that path, and you're going to continue to attract those people.
Yep. But even the clients, but when you're hiring people, once you hire people that are in your lane, those are people for life that you're going to stick with, and they get it. They're there to build your business, not just to do a project for you or just do a one-off kind of. Coming back to that fiber thing, like, those guys are just there to produce mass amounts of product, not to help you build your business over long term. They're just there to kind of do one-offs. Again, that's the difference between experience versus cost kind of thing.
Yeah, it's also relationship than transactional.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And as we know, every great business, especially with real estate, it is all relationship business, 100% relationship building. And because you might sell that one house, as I think about it too, like real estate there's very few repeat buyers. You buy a house, and the length of repeat buying is very, very long comparatively to a coffee every morning. So building that, the deeper that relationship and the deeper you kind of understand someone, the more those sort of like the word of mouth, that's where the word of mouth marketing comes in. And that's where you can kind of crank that up. So the more as an agent you can put into really understanding the person, building your brand that way, and putting a lot of work and effort into that relationship, that's where you can kind of turn on that word of mouth marketing tools. So that once the house is sold and you're like, hey, do you have any other friends that want to buy or sell? And then it becomes, like with any brand, if it's a trusted brand, it's something that people are going to keep coming back to again and again. It recognizes, but also it's got to feel trustworthy. And if you come off as that, that's part of it too. So
going back to the book on this, are there templates or are there the questions, a list, or whatever it is that agent should be using to verify that person's, or at least not verify, but try to weed out the people that are going to be good ones and those that aren't?
100%. Yeah, there is a whole section about finding the right person. So in that is, as good as a portfolio looks, again, real estate agents look as good as a large page of sold houses. It doesn't really talk to the experience that the buyers had of those sold houses or the sellers of the sold houses, right? So part of that is interview them, but also as good as their portfolio looks, which is just ask for referrals, or sorry, ask for people that they've worked with, past clients and things like that, because that's going to really speak to how the person works, how on budget they were. All the things actually really kind of matter when it comes down to a project. And that's kind of that's going to be the good and bad of what's going to come out of that project. And that's kind of, so ask for past clients. And if they can't get, here's one of the red flags and blind spots. If they can't give any to you, chances are they didn't end that well, or it just they're not friends or in communication with them, but that speaks volumes in this world of business. So move on, because there's lots out there looking for work, and just take your time in hiring them and finding the right person with that right vibe that you have, that have done the work in your industry, that kind of gets the industry. They don't have to work. Here's another thing to talk about with real estate agents, is that they don't necessarily have to have done a lot of work in real estate to be really good, to produce really good design work for your industry either. So they don't necessarily have to work a lot in your industry. Sometimes it's better if they do a mix, because that way there's an overlap there and they're not just producing real estate stuff day in and day out. So that's kind of a big thing too.
How do most agents are cost sensitive, right? They have a lot of overhead, a lot of expenses going out. Is there a tool in there to evaluate value versus investment? Is there,
Good.
or do you have words on that?
No, I do have words on that. Those things are really, really, really difficult to kind of to measure, because depending on what's been invested in, but on average, they say between 10 to 12% of your revenue should probably go to marketing in one way or another. And I think that's kind of just put that away into something and keep that as the slush fund for your marketing. So when the opportunities do arise, or you do see a really good set strategy on how to execute things, you're not just sort of like just throwing money at a wall. Maybe if I can kind of even back this up, is hiring someone that can help you produce a really good long-term strategy, and not just how to build your business, and not just sort of like, hey, we're gonna build these specific things, but what's the long-term plan? I think that's where it comes down to what to invest in, how much to save. Do a little bit of market research of like, hey, if I want a bus shelter ad, or if I want a side of the bus, how much is it going to cost me to be where I need to be to compete with the people that I want to compete with? And that's at the very beginning, doing that little bit of research. How much is that newspaper ad or that the real estate magazine ad? What do they cost, so that you're not kind of caught off guard? So you actually kind of maybe how much you need to make to reinvest them and put in there. And it's tough, because you never know who's going to see what those are, though. I don't return on investment on some of those pages. It takes a long time for print to work, but it does work, because it's like some of the biggest brands we see, they're the biggest because of they've been out there repeating their name and their message constantly. So, but that's not all you have to do. But finding a designer, finding a marketer that can figure out what things to invest in early at your set budget to get the most impact. And that's a market per market, kind of whether or not you're in residential or commercial, finding those resources, but finding those people to kind of give those insights. That's I would say probably key. And then budget, understand what it costs to be there, and then work your way up to it.
Gotcha. Let's dig into who you are and what you've done. You've had a long career in marketing. Can you give us an idea of what that's been and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, probably close to 30 years now in marketing. I worked at some large agencies, and then I caught that entrepreneurial bug very early on. I think we all kind of know, when you're an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur. Even if you're in a company, you're always looking for that way out or that side hustle. And for me, that was the agency. To be a designer, to work freelance was always it for me. But here's one of the things I did early on is, like, I asked some mentors. I had some mentors at that point in design world and business. And I said, hey, what do I need to do to kind of jump this ship to make sure that I land as safely and softly as possible? It's going to be the softest ride. And so I got a lot of insight from them, and it was just that being like, be business minded. As much as you're creative, be business minded. So it's kind of like always be selling. I always never miss out on an opportunity to kind of talk about what you do and who you are. And so in that, just started building really great relationships early on, because that was always something that was kind of instilled for me. And from here, 30 years later, just sort of working with, honestly, I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and I don't know if you guys know about the real estate up here, but it's booming. And so we've worked with everybody from very small 5-person shops right through to one of the biggest ones here was the Klein Group, in which they started off commercial, and all their commercial clients, they were like, hey, now you've sold this commercial property, we have a house to sell. Can you sell us houses? So we were there right from the very beginning with them, and kind of grew from the commercial right through to building a large marketing plan for everything from the hoarding around buildings or plots and things like that. So we've been fortunate to have been out in Vancouver for quite a while, because the building boom is big, and that's kind of, we know a lot about it because there's a lot of agents out here, and that's
I bet.
Always.
What do you see as probably the biggest and the easiest avoidable mistakes agents are making?
Oh, good question. Not understanding their niche. Not understanding who they are. What's their differentiator? What is really who they are? And that's probably the biggest thing, is sort of they're diving, maybe they're jumping too far too fast, and not really understanding who they are and their market is, and they're just they want it all right now, and they want it all right now on like a shoestring budget. And that's probably the biggest thing. And that's kind of, because one of the biggest things is, like, the higher you go, the higher the fall. And that is sort of learn how to make those little sort of make the mistakes when they're small, when communications and all of those things you can learn. And just seeing some of the guys just scrapping it out with kind of nickels and dimes, but now because they built relationships and because they became a lot scrappier, a lot more their creativity and ingenuity was there. It's kind of we see it in business as well. It's like the entrepreneurs who have sometimes the littlest budget will find creative ways of doing things and become a lot more creative than companies that are funded, because when people are funded, they're just gonna they're spending money everywhere, and it's not so much it's neither strategic nor tactical. But when you don't have a lot, you have to be strategic and tactical, and that's really when when you can kind of the return on investment starts coming in, because they're so much more well thought out rather than the spray and pray approach. When you have so much money and everything else, is that you can go through it very fast. So that's probably be very strategic and tactical at the very beginning. That's probably one of the biggest kind of mistakes. I don't see people doing that. And hence their marketing budget just kind of goes to waste, because just there's no measuring of it either. And that's kind of like, you invest in something, what's that? And for real estate agents, where numbers are the entire thing, that's probably weird as I think about it now, because real estate is really all about the fine numbers of what cost per square foot and what all these, it is very number.
All comes down to numbers. How many phone calls, how many people you talk to, how many appointments you get.
Yep.
It's numbers.
And so in that, when it comes to marketing, it's not their return on investment, or what they're not measuring things as much as or as well as they could or should have. So that's usually a big thing, is that put those things in place. There's a lot of really great tools out there to do so. And that's kind of a big blind spot, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I know one of the stories I've heard, there was an agent out there, brand new, starting out, got her first check, and it's a good size check, as most they can. Yep. And she's like, okay, if I take 10% of this money out, how many houses can I mail to monthly for the next 12 months? It was only like 8. It wasn't a large number. And every time she got a check, same thing. And she's huge, a couple thousand houses in her farm, massive $1 million producer, and gross commission, at least, if not that. Just really doing it, just like you said, slowly building, taking it off the top. I'll take your taxes off first, then you market.
Reinvest, because you're only lightening your load over time. And building a business, just like real estate, it's if you're really in it, you're looking at like 5 to 7 years to get that momentum before you're really. I'm not sure the timing on it there, but sort of like, what is that to get that momentum to which it's running a little bit like clockwork, but the investment money for marketing is really kind of paying for itself over and over again. And it's just, it gets a little lighter, a little bit easier. So that's so smart. We always hear those stories of actors and getting their first check and buying a really super expensive car only to be dinged with how much everything else costs. It's just maintenance costs on it, how much all the, replace the tires to the point where they can't afford it, because just they didn't spend it wisely. So it's that's too, that finding your business is that investment and splurge, but just make sure that you're putting money back in to keep the lights on and keep the gas in the tank.
It's hard for anybody, not just real estate agents, but for anybody to look at somebody who's successful and try to emulate that. When they were starting out, they weren't successful. They were grinding. They were doing all the things you were saying.
Yep. Those 14-hour days. Yeah. Knocking on doors and doing the grunt work, right? Versus now we see people when they're kind of floating along and people are just naturally calling them and hiring. But there was those probably years of just the putting in the quote unquote grunt work of picking up the phone and calling. And it's just, but I gotta say, there's something very rewarding of, like, as nice as it is to get referrals and stuff, there's also when you're kind of grinding it out to get that one thing, like if you got to make 100 calls, that one person that says yes, there's such a reward in that too. And you learn a lot. Well, here's another thing, is that unless you really, if you're just doing them to do them, don't do them to learn. With every with every conversation comes some insight, and keep on learning. I remember my first interview. Went. Here was the example. The first interview I did, it went good. It was a solid good. But the next interview I did went from a 7.5 out of 10 to like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. It was awful. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the worst at this. But what I did is like, okay, I'm going to then figure out why it was as bad as it was, like what kind of breaking it apart and assessing it. And that's kind of where, if you don't, as an entrepreneur or as a brand or marketer, if you don't figure out what the mechanics of how stuff works or doesn't work, then you're never learning and you're never going
Right.
to improve or anything else like that. But I took that show, I took that I took that big loss as I was like, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's all these things I need to kind of prepare for and all that, just in case. And some of it had to do with the host. The energy wasn't there. They had no idea what we were really talking about. So I was like, okay, next time, if anything like this happens, I need to be prepared and I need to, and that's it. As an entrepreneur, but none of that would have happened. I wouldn't have learned to do a bunch of other, wouldn't have learned from that experience if I didn't actually go out and start doing it. So I think every part of being an entrepreneur is falling down and getting back up and going again and learning from it, being like, okay, what happened? How did I trip? To bring it back to my book is kind of like, I'm helping entrepreneurs and everybody else do that a lot less. So pointing out where the potholes are and the sticks and everything else, so that they fall a little less. And that was part of the book.
Yeah. It's also important to look at what went right.
Yes.
To repeat. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just walk over and you just feel like you get, oh, that worked. And then you don't know what you just said.
Yep.
And it doesn't happen again, or what you just
Small
did.
win. Yep. Small wins, right? They're just make sure you count them too. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Hey, I'm going to bring up one of my pet peeves. And one of the challenges I've had is consistency in branding. I've seen when I'm coaching an agent, one of the things I first do is I pull up all their assets, all the social media and everything they have.
Yep.
And there's so often different look and feel on different sites, on their printed materials.
Yep.
Where does somebody begin with that morass of
first it can't be diagnosed as schizophrenia first. But no, it does. Here's where it starts from, is that if you don't have a clear path of where you're going or what the goal is, that long-term strategy, you're constantly going to just put stuff out there and be like, if you're only doing small tactile things like putting up a post and waiting for likes or waiting for any kind of approval, and it's like, oh my God, that didn't get it, maybe going to shift over here, or it comes down to figuring out, I'm going to reiterate this, but doing that kind of that research and understanding of who you are, what your message is. And the more, the tighter that kind of, how you can write that up, the tighter that sort of, you can make that brand or that understanding. And the more you stick with it, that's how those brands are built, versus like, if you don't really know, you're just trying a bunch of stuff out. And that's where you're just sort of like, oh, do something over here. I'll do this over here. Oh, my color's pink. Oh, no, that pink didn't really land that well. Now I want to try something mauve. And then when the shifts are so big, it just doesn't lend itself to any consistency whatsoever. But if you kind of know what direction you go, you have something very strategic, and if you have a game plan, stick to that game plan, because if things don't work, also just move or shift things slightly. But you don't need to take big swings either way, because in the long term, if everything kind of works out correctly, that strategy is going to kind of work out. And that's where sometimes finding the templates or those mentors to give you those insights, to kind of give you, let's just say, narrow the road so it's a little straighter. It's not a wide open field that you're driving, because we've seen people, and nothing kind of scares clients off than lack of consistency, because they never know what they're going to get. Right. Are they going to get the pink salesperson or the mauve person or the black? Like who's going to show up at any given time? And that's kind of, customers and clients love consistency, love to know, like, if they're going to refer you to somebody, you're going to be the exact same person that they use to this other person as well. So nothing, as I think about it now, is in real estate, nothing's more important than consistency and showing up as that same person, because that builds that trust, builds that brand. So just spend some time and do the work and get those, just figure out, it can change as you grow year over year, as your projects, as your clients grow, all that sort of stuff. But here's another thing, Joe, it's also too about being authentic on who you are. And I
think that's the hardest thing for people to figure out.
Yeah.
There are certain people that get it. They know who they are. They know what they can do. They know their messaging, or they're quick to figure it out. And then I think for the most of us, it's a journey. And if I know GPT is there, yet if you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to get the true.
You get the answers you want to hear, right?
Exactly. So one of the things that I when I work with somebody is I ask questions they don't want to answer. I'll ask a question, often there's silence. And that's what you need. You need to get people to really dig deep into who they are and where their happiness is and where it's going to be in the future. And really, it's not an easy thing to figure out. And once you have
No.
it,
Yep.
and you, like you're saying, you get that messaging out
Yep.
and you're true to who you are in everything you do, and you're telling that story in everything you do.
100%. And one of the tips or tools that we use, and it's in the book as well, is the five whys. It's called the five whys, and it's a question where you want to get into real estate, and then from that answer you ask why. You ask why 5 times deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to like the core of like, oh, I just don't want to see people in their home, or it brings me joy to like having a living space or some place of comfort. Like you figure out the core reason of what that is underneath all of the kind of, I would say the glitz and glam, but everything that's the facade of the real estate industry. And I think that's when yeah, if you can figure that out and understand what that is inside you, but I want to just put a couple in a home. I want to put families into homes. That's that authentic message. And all of a sudden that your entire brand can be built off of that, right? Because you're going to show up every day, whether or not to a buyer or a seller, as that. So it's really important because that's kind of, and that's also too, Joe, that's when you're living your best life.
Yeah,
when you feel
that's cool.
free and you feel money is great and everything else, but when you show, like, when you can kind of do what you love to do and be authentic about it, and sort of there's something really rewarding, and yeah, it's a good feeling to be like that. So
Awesome. Brady, this has been fantastic. You've shared a bunch of tips. So just give a sum up on why real estate agents should get your book and what they should expect out of it.
awesome. Well, honestly, a great experience. So great questions too. Essentially, the Blindspots Handbook is a little bit of it's the marketing instruction booklet. It is essentially it's an insurance policy against all the kind of bad things that might happen. But honestly, it's about being able to understand and ask, like everything in life. It's like if you ask the right questions, you're going to get those deeper insights and you're going to learn from it. So in that, this book is really about creating the best version of yourself and your brand that you possibly can. It's getting more out of your teams, more out of you, more of your creative team, and just it's essentially getting more out of getting more of your investment dollar out of everything that you put in, whether or not that be your time, your money. And that's kind of what the book was really built for. Is it's for entrepreneurs to learn from, but get the most out of it so they can do and build bigger.
That's fantastic. And I haven't read this.
Yeah.
I will give it a plug. When I read books, or when people read books that aren't specifically towards the industry, like this was not written by a real estate agent that made their money in a big way. So
Yep.
In that one way, it's coming from a true marketing standpoint, and new ideas are going to come to their head. It's not going to be somebody else's real estate idea. It's going to be their real estate idea. It's going to be them seeing the reality of who they are, what they want to be, how they can tell that. It's probably more how they can tell the story of who they are and where they want to go in their business,
And
without
Joe,
a real estate agent saying, this is what I did, this is what you should do.
Yep. And it comes down to the more bolder you can act. If the more you know about your industry, about how to leverage your consultants, how to the more the bigger decisions you can make with more confidence. And that's kind of what also too was the underlying thing of this book is the more confident you can make those decisions, the bigger things you can go after, because you have a general understanding of how things work, so that you can make those bigger, bolder decisions. Yeah,
I'm having technical difficulties on this end. Thank you for your time. This has been really enlightening. Viewers, questions, please post underneath. Any comments, we'll definitely get back to you. All Brady's contact information is here. Reach out to them. And where can they get your book?
At blindspotshandbook.com. So yeah, cool. Blindspotshandbook.com. It's available on Amazon. They can look it up there. It's a guy tripping over the eye in blind spot, so it's pretty obvious. But the website also to get it anywhere is blindspotshandbook.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Be your best and have fun.